Go ahead.
OK， 好，感谢大家已经在线上等待了一段时间的这个咱们今天晚上的参与者。我们刚刚的这个讨论，大家不用担心，还没有进入到这个最精彩和正式的这个阶段。前面的话是我们在等待期间，几位这个我们的嘉宾，还有这个我们的今天的主持人，就近期的一些个话题做了一些个讨论。所以正式的这个讨论环节的话呢，是会像我们今天现在看到这屏幕上显示的，是关于在疫情中后期。一个什么样的投资才能够带来可观收益这样一个大话题的讨论。其实像我们这样的一个线上论坛活动的话呢，已经进行了几场了。我们近期的一些话题呢，包括像国际合规，是由我们事务所的伯格律师，他是在我们事务所这个诉讼和大宗跨境交易部门的合伙人。还有就是我们的这个移民部的合伙人进行了一个美国移民政策分析的一个这样的线上论坛。当然还有我们上个星期刚刚进行过的一场关于信托以及家族财富传承这样一个话题的线上论坛。所以进行到今天的话呢，我们非常有幸请到了我们多位的嘉宾，他们的这个各个人的背景或者是这个成长经历和工作经历都非常的不一样。那我们今天也是集合了，就是超过了3个国家和地区工作经验、文化背景和语言类型的这样一个嘉宾的大集合。那大家放心，今天的这个我们的论坛的话呢，会以英文来进行，所以保证我们所有的这个嘉宾或者是我们的参与者都能够明白对方。那如果在过程当中大家有任何听不懂的问题，或者希望跟这个嘉宾进行交流的地方，可以通过我们的这个 chat 的功能，也就是聊天这个功能，将您的问题发送过来，我会帮助我们今天的这个活动主持人Sam 来做一个问题的收集，也可以帮大家把这个问题最后集中起来。如果我们今天来不及做这个现场的解答的话，会在会后再跟大家取得联络。那我们刚刚在开始的时候呢，我有 launch 一个小型的这个调查，所以请新加入的这个朋友可以帮我们填写一下。同样类型的这个调查会在我们大概快要结束的时候还有一个，所以也辛苦大家到时候帮我们来填写。这个调查的话呢，是主要我们来用作了解大家对于活动的一个报名的喜好以及活动的一个信息反馈，所以不会用作任何的商业用途，请大家放心。那下面差不多我们的这个时间就交给我们今天的活动主持人 Sam。当然同时也预告一下，我们同样类型的这个同一时间的这个论坛还会在下个星期4的晚上10点钟，美东时间的晚上10点钟，北京时间的周5早上10点钟进行。那下一次我们会 cover 的话题是关于知识产权保护，也是请到了美国和中国同一个法律领域的2位律师来做分享。所以今天的话我们会进行这个关于疫情中后期投资方面的一个分析。所以下面的时间交给几位嘉宾和主持人。
好的，非常谢谢 Ivy. So Ivy just gave a very brief intro and a couple of issues that we should be talking about today. So let me just start off by telling the audience a little background of what we're doing. So first off, I want to thank all of our panelists. It's great that we have this platform. Like we mentioned this earlier. But we're very grateful to have this way of communicating, this new way of communicating. And of course, thanks to the panelists' time, right? You guys are either in New York or in Sao Paulo, so it's very late. Most of our audience is probably in China. I'm guessing maybe Ivy can run a poll later, but it's daytime here for me, so it's easier, but it's nighttime for you guys, so thank you very much. The forum that we're doing is a weekly forum. We do invite guests from all kinds of fields, mostly law, but we do tend to invite experts in other fields as well to do a more diverse discussion and to get deeper into different topics that maybe lawyers might not be able to talk about. So today we have the first panelist that I'd like to introduce to everyone is Christopher Morick. Christopher goes by Chris. Chris is a off-counsel at JOG at our law firm. He works mostly with real estate transactions. He's an expert in this field. One of the very impressive things that I've heard about him is he was able to do a lot of remote closing during the pandemic. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's very impressive. Wow, that's really great. So the second panelist I'd like to introduce is Reynaldo Ma, Ma 律师. He is like me, Brazilian Chinese, located in São Paulo. He's a partner at Tosini Freire, which is one of the most famous, well-known, and a top law firm in Brazil. He's the head of their China desk. He also works with corporate practice, cross-border transactions. Having him in the discussion today will give us a very great insight on what's going on in Brazil. And the third panelist is Jennifer Song. She's a senior associate at Cushman Wakefield. For those here in China, it's 戴德梁行. It's one of the most famous, most top commercial real estate companies in the world. She's located in New York, and the reason why we have her is to get her to provide us with some insights. Although our panel, our forum tonight is not really directly aimed at commercial real estate, but since commercial or real estate in general does play a very, very, very big role in the economy, her insights will help us keep our discussion moving forward. So just very little notes on our forum tonight. First, if you have any questions, Ivy did say that. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A button down in the app or in the window that if you're doing it using a desktop. Feel free to send them in. I will keep an eye. Ivy will keep an eye. And I believe there's a raise your hand function. If you want to raise your hand and notify us that you put out a question, do that. Second, feel free to use the chat function as well. You guys can talk to each other by typing. That wouldn't be a problem. It will not affect us at all. Number three, I'd like to let you guys know that today's forum really does not constitute any kind of legal or financial advice. We're here just to do a discussion. And if you really need any kind of professional service, make sure you either contact us or consult a professional for any kind of legal or financial advice. So let's not spend too much more time on intros and disclaimers. Let's get started. So to get the ball rolling, I'm just gonna call names here. One of the things that really has been asked here in China, I've been asked a lot by our attorney partners, law firms that we work with, is what's next? What's going to happen next in the US, in Latin America? But, this is a very big question. I don't think any of us can tell the future. But before we get into that, I think it's worthwhile we talk about what happened in the last 3 months. We all know that the whole world is taking a big hit. Not only just the pandemic with number of deaths, but also economy, all kinds of sectors. But specifically in your country, in your field, Chris, would you mind sharing what happened in the past 3 months?
Sure, and thank you to everybody who's listening. The economy has shattered in the last 3 months. So much of the economy in the US, and especially in New York and New Jersey, where we are, is based on hospitality, restaurants, theaters, arenas, hotels, people going out, people spending money, people meeting friends and family in public places and spending their money in these places. And that all stopped. And it's slowly in the last maybe 2 to 3 weeks started to reopen. But again, because such a big part of our economy is based on that, a lot of these businesses have suffered dramatically. They have no cash flow. Many are going out of business. They're shutting stores. They are, laying off workers, etc. And all of those, relating it a little bit to commercial real estate, all of those activities that I've described, they all occur on commercial real estate, all those things. So, and the government here has tried to prop up the economy lending money to businesses, having them pay their workers, etc. But it doesn't come close to replacing a free system where people are out and about and, you know, living there what in February was their normal life. So it's taken a big toll. You know, it's going to take, we hear all these things, there's going to be a V, there's going to be an immediate recovery. I don't think so. I think it's going to be long lasting, and unfortunately, a lot of businesses will never recover, and a lot of people will never get their jobs back.
Right. I do agree. I think this is I think this is going to be a change in how we do things in general,
Yes.
how we communicate, how business is conducted. But you know, for very selfish reasons, we know that Brazil is a number 2 in the coronavirus pandemic. Not in a good way, right? But if Reynaldo, would you mind telling us what's going on? What has happened? Brazil, it's still. I'm not there. I haven't been back there for a while. But from my understanding from the news, I feel it could be worse than what Chris talked about in the U.S. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. Thank you to you, Sam, to GLG, and also to sharing time with Christopher and Jennifer. Brazil was hit a little later by the coronavirus, right? It was the first response was in January, and February was still throwing Carnival. Which is a big party. You know, a lot of tourists comes in, and we were only really realizing hit by that in March. So in several senses, we tried to, is this really happening to Brazil? You know, there's a joke in Brazil that would say that God is Brazilian, so he will keep protecting us and preventing anything from happening. But it really struck us. And we are still working in the first wave of contagions. We haven't reached the peak in several senses. Some governors, some leadership, some of them want to open up, some want them to keep it closed. But still, we're still in lockdown currently in Brazil. And as you have a lockdown, obviously we have a big hit in the economy. You know, all the sectors that works with consumers, it got a big impact. And when we talk about any other country, developing country, one thing you have in mind is also the currency rate. You know, the Brazilian real actually made a devaluation of close to 40% into its peak because of the pandemic that happens. The stock market crashed. But there is one thing when Christopher was mentioning how the U.S. economy works, I mean, it's interesting that Brazil reliance about economy and our exports is really based on commodities. We do export a lot of amounts of soybeans, of grains, and meat. And for those sectors, you know, while they were not heavily affected into that, and somehow they were actually benefiting from that because we have a currency devaluation. So, you know, the markets, particularly in China, kept consuming a lot. So we're still seeing the economy is hit hard. I think we're going to have a recession. All the estimates is that we're going to have a decrease in our GDP, 5 to 7%. But still, there is some reliance on the Brazilian industry or in the whole sector, particularly in the agri sector. In the agri sector, as is the base of our exports.
Right, very well. So yes, the reason why I said for very selfish reasons, you know, I'm being able to get this very direct insights from you. Being Brazilian, but you know, located in China, my heart is with my home country. But since you touched on the subject of currency, I don't know if Jennifer, would you be able to share from your industry, from the commercial real estate, how are investors looking at this? How is the whole the global picture in this? Are Chinese investors looking to buy all over? Are U.S. investors or asset holders trying to sell? Is capital flowing to other countries for opportunities? What is going on in your field?
So in terms of the Chinese investor, you know, the capital coming to the United States, I would say is pretty much freeze. lots of firms obviously trying to transfer money from Hong Kong, but right now, given this the new situation in Hong Kong, that obviously become quite difficult. But it's very interesting that Renato and Sam, you guys talking about currency, and today we're talking about opportunity. So I would like to share just a very quick, about my insight. One thing I feel like I've been working in commercial real estate for a couple of years. One thing is that I feel like the due diligence process when we're looking at tenants can actually create some opportunity when you're looking at investing stocks or currency. For example, we're talking about Hong Kong dollar. What's the future of Hong Kong dollar? So my firm have probably the biggest presence in Hong Kong in terms of office leasing, all sorts of things. So I recently spoke with my colleague in Hong Kong, and they told me that a lot of foreign firms who has office in Hong Kong right now starting to put office in the market for sublease. So it's actually quite shocking because just literally just a few months after everything that has been happening in Hong Kong, and then Donald Trump announcing that Hong Kong no longer have a special treatment, that was a huge thing. So I heard about certain people starting to hedge against Hong Kong dollar. I'm not saying this is some opportunity, definitely, but I do know that a lot of Western investor, the presumption is that the Hong Kong dollar, there's a possibility of a devaluation ranging from 5% to 40%. So again, this is a kind of unfortunate event happening in Hong Kong. I'm not saying you guys have to do this, but it's just one of the information I've been receiving that is quite interesting.
Right. So the main point of our discussion tonight really is not to go too deep into the unfortunate events or the hits with the pandemic. I really want to learn from you guys is actually the future, right? And I know things are very unstable and it's something that nobody can predict. But if we can just set, a little shorter time frame, Jennifer, maybe you can just keep going on this, but for the next 3 months, what is the commercial real estate market going to look like in the US, in New York City? Because for what you mentioned, what's going on in Hong Kong, it seems like it might be happening the same over there.
Honestly, it's my personal opinion. I'd love to hear about Chris as well. I think it's going to be a disaster. First of all, we feel like in terms of office rent, it's going to drop around 12 to 20%, but most likely it's going to be 20%. Second of all, Chris kind of mentioned about yesterday, first of all, WeWork. Obviously, this is not on record. We do hear about WeWork start to entertain a bankruptcy option. But you have to know WeWork sort of the occupier. They occupy almost 17% of the New York City office space. And if WeWork by any chance collapse, and I don't know how the landlord in short period of time be able to, like Chris say, pay real estate tax, pay back the bank. And honestly, this pandemic will just happen so sudden. There's no repayment, either the government or the bank is able to give anything to the landlord, and tenant doesn't have very limited tools, to talking about, tenant can't pay the rent. There's just such a limited option in front of a tenant as well. So I have to say right now it's a mess. It's kind of in a mess. It's still, there's no clear direction coming from the government in terms of commercial real estate yet. So I think it's going to be a disaster. And even just in my firm, Cushman & Wakefield, the only thing we do, the most, we are commercial real estate, so we have to get back to the business. So people like us working on commission, to make a living. But the truth is that even New York reopening, it's actually less than 10% of people will go back to office. So think about that. For people actually rely on the industry for a living, it's not even willing to go back to, to the office. So I just cannot imagine in a broad ranging of, other tenants, occupier, and think about landlord. I feel it's going to be very hard.
Right. I did mention earlier that Chris was able to do remote closings during this whole this whole freeze and this whole crisis. With what Jennifer said, I do believe that her remarks are probably what's going to happen. I think it's something that we are all looking into. But since Chris, if you're able to do some closings, and probably they weren't commercial real estate, but what do you think the opportunities are? If people are still doing business, if people are still acquiring assets, if people are still looking at it, what's sort of the direction that this might go?
Right. Well, all right. I'll try to be as brief as I can. My main office is in New York City, as we are with JLG. It's in downtown Manhattan. I haven't been there since March 17th. That's almost 3 months. But I'm still working every day from home, as are, I think, a majority of people who work in any big city in the country. So there's, when I started in 1991, everybody went to their office. There was no internet. I mean, I sound like a dinosaur now. There was no internet. We didn't have Zoom. We barely had faxing back then. So everything was done in your office, and the offices were in these, skyscrapers, mostly in Manhattan and other big cities. But, starting a couple of years ago, people started to work remotely, companies like Zoom and LogMeIn and other ways to get your data and get your service without leaving your home. And now this has really accelerated that for everyone. So now people don't need to travel to the big city. So that's probably, as Jennifer said, the commercial real estate in the big city is going to take a hit. But larger companies, from what I'm hearing and sometimes seeing, maybe they'll open an office in a suburb where a lot of their employees are. So rather than commute to Manhattan, they commute 10 minutes in their town, whether, in a suburb. And I think that's the trend. Rather than having all the business world concentrated in, some high densely populated areas, it's going to be, at least in the immediate future, it's going to be spread out.
Right. Ronaldo, I know that, I think we probably spoke about this a couple days ago, but I know that Brazil is still in the first wave. And we know that when the US markets move, we move together back in Brazil. Hearing what Chris and what Jennifer said, what are your worries? What do you think is going to happen in the next 3 months for Brazil?
Well, I think in terms of worries, I think we need to, control it, flatten the curve. I think, as we said, we haven't got yet there. We're still working on it. So, as everybody's talking about a second wave, we're still working on the first wave. So but the good, it's some sort of sad in some sort of sense, but in some sort of sense it's good. I mean, we can learn from the experience from the other companies, the other countries. So we can learn, like for example, as a law firm, we're benchmarking. We have a lot of law firms around the world. How are they doing? How are they managing that? How are they managing risk? How are they managing the groups, the workers, the stations and all of that. So we can benefit from that. And looking ahead, I think everybody wants to see how the virus actually behave, I think, around the world. It's actually gonna get worse, or we're gonna have a vaccine or something like that. And that's what actually determine, how we move back. I don't think we're gonna have a quick move back. The economy is hit hard. A lot of people actually lost their jobs and so. But I agree with Christopher then saying that a lot of move to the suburbs. Actually, I forgot about this news, but today one of the largest stock broker house in Brazil just announced that they're going to build a new headquarters in the suburbs of São Paulo, not in the main financial district, and they're just going to move the headquarters there because of that. Now, with that, that's a leader moving in already. They're taking that, announcing that. So if that's going to be a trend, and it's likely to be a trend, then it's going to be a big shift in the commercial real estate.
Right. We know that, Latin American countries are, the governments are probably not, as efficient as other democratic governments, or they're not as diligent in making the right policies. my question to you is, again, like we cannot predict the future, but one of the issues that I keep having in my mind with Brazil is how is this shift going to change the whole way that our economy works, right? Because reading the news, I know that I think the Brazilian Soccer Federation really wants to open up the soccer games. Mm-hmm. You know, just like the US, I think NFL is trying to do something, NBA is trying to do something. But my question to you is very simple. So, excuse me. So, if this whole pandemic is changing everything, what kind of things we should be watching out for? Do you think Brazil or Latin American countries are gonna keep or actually take a more aggressive approach in supply chain? Are they gonna build more infrastructure? Are they gonna be doing policies to promote some kind of sectors to boost the economy? What's your take on this?
Well, this is actually a very interesting question. I mean, because it runs down to the politics. You know, we had elections a couple of years ago, and our current government, the current administration, are not really keen on having huge government spending. While the opposition was trying to put this a way of boosting the economy, having good, large amounts of government spending. Usually government spending is a good way to pull up the economy. I mean, it happens to build, and as they say, you know, the difference between a economic crisis caused by a war and by a virus, that in the war you have all the infrastructure destroyed, and by a virus you don't have it. So by pulling investment in the infrastructure, you can pull up the economy. In the developed countries, you have the infrastructure built on. Well, in Brazil, in the developing countries, you don't have that. And it's an interesting option. I don't think the current administration want to tap into that option yet. But when things go worse, that might be a way to go. You know, have the government push the investments in infrastructure and then push the economy, pull the economy from that.
Right. Okay. Well, we actually have a question from the audience. The first question, probably Jennifer or Chris might be able to give us a little insight. One of the attendees says that he's currently living in downtown Manhattan. What do you guys think it's the situation of the rental situation is going to be like in the next 2 months? I mean, you know, the question seems a little bit broad, and probably he's asking for residential rentals. It's a lady. So the question she was asking is the rental situation. So maybe if Jennifer, if you know anything about this, because I know that in commercial real estate, you know, it seems like there are listings for rental buildings that want, or just residential buildings that want to be sold. When I see these listings, they kind of look like distressed assets to me. They are very, very under the market price. How does this whole thing tie into your industry?
Well, obviously I'm not expert in residential market, but one thing I would like to share is that in downtown Manhattan, there are lots of supply in terms of apartment. So if you talk about demand and supply, so that has been an issue for quite a long time. Even before pandemic, we can feel the pressure in terms of you know, the keeping the pressure of rent in downtown apartment. We can feel the pressure. So I don't think in short period of time it's going to go up at all. And second of all, you know, pandemic happens, that in some way changed a lot of particular millennials our behavior, because before pandemic people kind of want to, you know, go back to the city, enjoy, you know, those social life. So you rent apartment in Manhattan, in downtown, you know, there's still a demand, quite strong demand there. But I think right now millennials start to, especially after pandemic, I think millennials started choosing to living in suburb. I mean, Chris talked about this yesterday, which I think makes total sense. I mean, especially we are Chinese, we've been observing the residential purchasing in tri-state area, quite closely. We noticed millennials also start looking at buying houses in Long Island, in New Jersey, moving out of the city. So I just feel like, if you will continue living in downtown Manhattan, I just don't feel like the rent will go up in next couple of years. It's just too much supply. But another good thing about downtown is that downtown does going through this recovery stage, because in terms of the investment to transportation, in terms of the whole dynamic of retail, this everything has been actually significantly improved after 9/11. So if we really value pros and cons, pros is the dynamics gets better, but the cons is that right now the pandemic and also the apartment supply, it just I don't feel like the dynamic will beat the supply. So my feeling is that there will be lots of pressure in terms of rent.
Right. I think in terms of supply and demand, I think this probably is a good way to analyze this. I actually used to live at 2 Gold Street when I was working in New York. And 2 Gold Street was a building that was turned into residential, if I'm not wrong, right?
Which building?
2 Gold Street.
Oh, okay.
For all the people listening, that's in the Wall Street. That's in the Wall Street area, just so people know.
Thank you for that, Christopher.
It used to be an office building, but
Right.
they turned it into residential. So I guess what Jennifer said is, in time of crisis, like previously 9/11, the current crisis right now with the pandemic, I think we should probably be able to logically or look at it with a very simple economic supply and demand comparison, right? If there's just too much available, then that's just what it's going to be. But we do have a follow-up question, which is actually in the same field, which is residential real estate. But the question was about sales. So maybe Chris can give a little insight on this.
Well, sales now are continuing. We had several contracts that were pending, that were signed maybe in February or early March before things really, took a turn for the worse here with the pandemic. Most of those have closed for the price that the people agreed to prior because they had a contract. And in analyzing, we felt that courts weren't going to forgive people from what they agreed to, even with the pandemic, unless there was something specific in the contract about it. Now, as a way to try to, jumpstart the economy, the government has lowered the mortgage rates. Mortgages are now, 3%, 4% for a 30-year loan, which is pretty good, which is historically on the low side. So they're trying to, get people to buy. And to me, if you can, if you're borrowing, $100,000, every percentage point is $1,000 a year. It's $80 a month. If you multiply that by, 4 or 5, depending on what you're borrowing, that's a lot of money you're saving by getting a low interest loan now. So the market is good to buy. It's good in a sense. There's not that much supply yet. I think people are now putting their places on because, again, let me just say this. Historically, the busy time is the spring, March, April, May. People, especially people with kids, look then. They want to move in the summer, so in the summer they can register their kids for school and wherever they've moved to. Since everything stopped, now is when things are really coming on, and I think in the next month or two we're going to see a lot of homes for sale, apartments for sale, and there's going to be a lot of activity. Couple that with the low rates, and it is, if you're interested in buying, it's a pretty good time to buy.
Right. I actually have a very close friend who lives in Bayside, and please do not contact me because I'm not a real estate agent. I do have a very good friend. She's trying to sell her house you know, she's willing to take a loss at it. You know, she wants to keep cash at hand. And I do agree with Chris. You know, from a loan perspective, definitely, if the banks, if the interest rates are favorable, then, you know, for investors, they should be looking into this. But I do want to loop back right now, though. Is your firm looking, you know, since we're talking about, you know, buying and selling, and investors looking at potential assets, has your firm seen or heard of or had any kind of inquiries? Doesn't have to be in real estate industry, but is there any activity? Are there big investors, private equity, hedge fund managers? Are they trying to use this? Have you heard of anything that they're trying to use this crisis as an opportunity?
I think that's a lot of sense into that. We haven't reached the point in which the companies are being sold. I mean, there will be definitely a lot of distress assets. A lot of the companies won't be able to survive that, but they're still trying to manage that. So we haven't seen a big flow yet. We're definitely going to see, and a lot of investors, Brazilian, domestic and foreign investors, are keeping an eye into that. So this is one point. Definitely that's going to happen, and there's a lot of clients keeping an eye on it, but no large movement yet. Something that we saw, and this is very interesting, and to understand how dynamic this goes. The currency, as we said, it plays an important role in foreign investors. Before the pandemic, we were about 4 reais to $1, and it reached 5. When it reached 5, anyone who was looking to buy any assets, and there was a lot of companies looking into that. Oh, that's maybe the time to step in. Actually, who did the due diligence, who was on the way to close, they closed. But the thing is, there was a momentum that a lot of companies were looking, oh, we should look into opportunities. But the thing is that the 5 reais, the currency devalued more, and it actually got close to 6. So those same guys that were really excited about the devaluation, they got scared because, you know, if you're looking into 4 to 5, if you buy it at $5 per dollar, you got a gain, you know, 25% gain. But when the currency continued to develop, then you're actually having a loss. So they actually stopped. So this is very interesting. There was a frenzy for a moment, and then they freeze. So now they're waiting to see how things balance down.
Right. Not to mention my age, but I did experience the era where we went from Cruzeiro to Cruzados,
Oh, yeah.
Cruzeiro, guys. We had that inflation where they, you know, like an egg costed like $1, and then, you know, afternoon it was like 1,000. I've experienced where Brazilian banks wouldn't let people withdraw money. These are things that happen in very, very volatile markets, right? And Brazil being one of the biggest countries in Latin America, it seems that, you know, it might, if it takes a really big hit, it's going to affect all over, you know, the countries nearby us. But have you heard of anything about the relationship with Brazil and other countries next door? Because I think on the news a couple weeks ago, Paraguay and other countries, they were closing the borders, right? And we were supposed to be one big family in Mercosur, right? So if you have any insights on this.
No, I think that it didn't cause any diplomatic or major economic issue. I think it was more really, you know, health issue and protecting, you know, as the numbers in Brazil it was increasing very drastically. And apparently our governments were, particularly in the beginning, wasn't take that very seriously, you know, just like a lot of our European counterparts. That hit, you know, the numbers comes up and every country was closing their borders. So that happened, but I don't think it was due to any economic issues. I mean, but definitely, I mean, the whole region is taking a big hit. And how are we going to recover that's going to take a while. The thing is, some countries might be better positioned into that. And in some sense, I mean, being a Brazilian is sad to say that, but, you know, maybe Peru or Colombia it's a better place to receive immediately receive assets in investments than Brazil. Brazil, again, it's going to pick up again. As I said, we got a lot of resilience, even about the currency. I mean, as I said, we're a big exporting country, and the devaluation helped us exports. Exports haven't been hit, so we still have, I know, a hard currency inflow into the country. So devaluation might not be that too strong. But again, it's a big hit, and it all says in how we deal with the pandemic in the months forward, how it behaves. If you can really flatten the curve, if you don't have a second wave, that can pull up a better recovery scenario. But as you said, Brazil is like a lot more stable. When you lived in Brazil, when you say, oh, we got a lot of problems, we got a lot less problems than we had in the past. We in total, Brazil have cut 15 zeros from its currency. Every time we change a currency, we cut 3 zeros every time. So it was a total of 15 zeros. We have inflation of 2 digits, and hyperinflation, super devaluation. But that time is gone. I think we reached stability, it's consolidated. So we don't have that volatility in Brazil anymore. So into this sense, I mean, it's hard to navigate, but it's hard to navigate anywhere. And we're not working in that scenario like, 20 years ago. Well, that would tell your age, Sam. Sorry for that.
Well, I hope not. Fingers crossed, because I still want to go back and enjoy some time over there. But no matter if it's real estate, commercial real estate, residential, or even in the forex market, and this can be based on your personal experience or what you've been going through in this pandemic. Me myself here in China, I've been in this situation for 5.5 months. So for me, I'm kind of used to it already. I know you guys are either in the beginning or in the middle of it. But from your perspective, and I'm gonna turn to Jennifer for this. Again, we cannot predict the future, but from your perspective, what things or what industries you think, or what kind of businesses are just going to change for good? We don't want to talk about being wiped out, but what kind of things are going to change for good? For example, Chris mentioned earlier, we have Zoom, right? This method of communication, it probably changed for really good. So if Jennifer, from your own personal experience, what do you think it's just not going to be there anymore?
Right. I have a couple of very interesting observations. So first of all, I think this pandemic, higher education in the United States is always a problem, right? I think my kid, when they go to school, I probably have to prepare more than $500,000 for them to just go to college. So I think what's interesting about this pandemic is that if you're looking at Harvard, right after pandemic happens, they start to kind of, back then if you're on Harvard's waiting list, there's no way you can even get into Harvard. Right pandemic happens, a lot of my friends start to pay much lower tuition to get the same degree from Harvard through online classes. So I'm actually wondering, this is actually such a critical problem in America. I'm just wondering, from now or in the long term, would that be in some way sort of balance the situation a little bit? Every day I didn't have to think about, okay, this year, how much money I save for my kids' scholarship fund for education. But hopefully through pandemic, the cost of education will get lower in that generation, but I don't think so. But just hopefully it won't be that crazy. So I think that's a very interesting thing that I feel like that's a change. I think that's a good change. Another thing is, one thing about commercial real estate, I'm not going to talk about boring stuff. What I'm talking about is when we look at tenants, I find it very interesting how does it relate to stock market. If you're looking at, so Cushman & Wakefield, and I also personally, every single day I've been tracking on which firm in New York City starting putting their office space in the market, which means they're not either growing or the employee working from home. They need to sublease their space, right? So I'm using that as one of a very interesting thing to looking at individual stocks. I mean, I'm not saying this is definitely a direct correlation, but it's very interesting. I'll give you guys an example. So there's one firm in Wall Street. Okay, they have a very big office. They have 20,000 square feet. So the stock was doubled on last Friday. which, you know, you literally gain 100%. So everybody was going crazy about this firm. But it's just so interesting that I've been looking at, you know, the sublease. I noticed, first of all, they're putting the whole entire office on the market for sublease. So I'm just interested. I emailed the broker. I say, hey, who is a sublandlord? And will sublandlord still going to be in the state? They told me, no, sublandlord is going back to China. So obviously, I'm not saying this is definitely correlated, you know, I'm not saying this is a determined factor when you do your own due diligence, but it's interesting. I mean, you're looking at a stock price went double while they completely wipe out the whole business in the United States. It just worth you to worth certain, you know, due diligence. And yeah, so many things, including Uber. You know, lots of people right now feel like, you know, Uber stock is a good buy or not. But just yesterday, Uber announcing they're going to put 80,000 square feet out in the market in the primary location in 3 World Trade Center. So interesting. Again, guys, I'm not saying that this is definitely something you have to invest out or not invest out, but it's definitely an interesting perspective when you're looking at, when you do your own due diligence for any investment opportunity. Because I noticed lots of my friends, they're looking at the financial, they're looking at SE report, they search all the interviews, everything, but none of them ever ask any of the broker they know, say, hey, can you check about where the office are, what they're doing? But this is actually such an indicator about, you know, just the dynamic of this firm.
Right. I think you actually brought up one of the hot topics in my household, which is education, right? One of my point of views is I have a 3-year-old son, and one of my point of views is that when it's time for him to go to college, probably he doesn't have to, right? So let's hope not. I think college is still great. You know, let's hope that, you know, the world doesn't change that much. So at least we can still get connected to their generation. But Chris, feel free to talk about education. But one of the questions I actually have for you about this change for good is from the legal perspective, right? How do you see contracts or clauses changing? What's gonna be defined as force majeure, termination? What's gonna change in the technical part of the law?
That's a good question. Nobody could foresee this, so no contract that I know had any sort of pandemic language in it, you know, until 2 months ago. There are other, you say force majeure, there's casualty provisions in like commercial leases if the premises is unusable. We have eminent domain if the government takes a premises, and, you know, the argument is the government told me I can't go to my place of employment, I can't go to my business. Is that a quote unquote taking under the clause? There's other legal doctrine like impossibility of performance, frustration of purpose. So all these, actually, they haven't really started to play out yet because courts around here really haven't reopened yet. And right now, the tenants, you know, when you're talking about real estate, tenants and landlords have so far had to fend for themselves and try to come up with some modification of their agreement if you know, to continue it. Going forward, yes, we'll probably have to put some sort of pandemic, you know, other, you know, clause like that in every lease, maybe even in every purchase contract, you know, in employment contracts, in all sorts of contracts. So yeah, it's more work for the lawyers, which isn't so bad. Let me just, if you don't mind, Jennifer was talking about, and you asked the question, how things are gonna change going forward. One thing I have in my mind is it's one thing to tell people, all right, we're open, my restaurant's open, the airlines are open, the flights are open. You know, sports is a huge industry in this country. You know, we have arenas with 50,000, stadiums with 100,000 people. It's one thing to tell everybody, yes, we're open. It's another thing to convince people to come. And I think that's going to be the bigger issue. That's going to take a much longer time because people are scared. You know, I'm going out into a restaurant with people sitting around me. I don't know who they are. You know, I don't know if anybody's sick, especially with this. You know, asymptomatic people can infect others. So I think that's a real hurdle. Aside from and I don't know how, other than the passage of time, really, I don't know how that hurdle is overcome. It's not going to happen in the short term. So that's also an effect. That's going to have an effect on business, even when they're quote unquote open again.
Very well said.
I absolutely agree because I think we touched about this when we spoke in private, where the showbiz or the movie business, you know, there were speculations that people are gonna overspend, right, to make up for the time that they didn't get to go to the cinemas or to the movie theaters. But that really doesn't seem to be the case in China. Right now, what I've been seeing here is, for example, and this actually just happened like 5 minutes before our forum started. My mother-in-law wanted to take my son to the gym to go to the swimming pool, and my wife was telling her no. It's like, you know, it's just something that I think consumer habits, consumer behavior, consumer psychology, it's all going to change. But you know, I understand that, you know, on the Brazil front, we are still at the first stage and we're still very early. But, you know, the main point of our forum is to look for opportunities and, you know, trying to get into our last, sort of the third segment, which is what I've been seeing here in China. It's some things have changed. Some industries have been created or boosted. For example, ghost kitchens. Well, delivery service in China has already been very strong. Ghost kitchens, they're even more stable. All kinds of startups are fundraising even faster. So is there any kind of sort of, not seed, but is there any kind of lead going on in Brazil where people are learning from China, who's, you know, just a couple of months ahead, or seeing how the US is fighting this pandemic? In Brazil, are people looking about this, or people are still just worried about the lockdown, worried about trying to open up, go to the beach and party? And what do you know, Ronaldo? What's going on over there?
I think people are still looking. I mean, general population, everybody is eager to go out, but everybody's afraid. Not everybody's afraid. Some are being irresponsible into that. But I mean, definitely the changes that you mentioned is the move, all the movement to online. If you let me just to tap in this point, because in here in Brazil, we try to compare the two largest cities like São Paulo and Rio, right? And Rio is a tourist city, the places where all the monuments, you know, the sightseeing places are. And São Paulo is pretty much just business, but São Paulo got a lot more tourists than in Rio. And the reason why we call that business tourists, because they just come for business-wise. And as everything's moving online, that part might get a big hit too, because people might not need to travel anymore. They just got used to having this kind of conferences. And when you hit that, you also hit real estate and everything else, right? So that's a big thing. I think New York got both, got tourists just for leisure and business tourists. Into the sense of opportunities, I think we read an example which was interesting, is that in Argentina, there is a revival of the drive-ins. I think we never had this in China, but you know, we had it in the US and Brazil and Argentina and a lot of countries. So people wanted to go to movies. They're not going to the movies anymore. They're going to the drive-ins because they have their cars are their shields, right? So they can have that. So that might be something slightly different into that sense. Delivery, this is also something, you know, a lot of the restaurants are actually shifted into that, you know, not entirely in ghost kitchens, but this is a trend that has been happening. It's it's super accelerating now. You know, but I don't see any trend that would say, oh, just go for this trend now. But definitely, the driving example is just something interesting. Probably something that would not happen in China.
Yes. Actually, all the drive-thrus, well, China doesn't have too many drive-thrus, right? Like KFC, McDonald's. Definitely not what the U.S. has. But interestingly is that they actually shut it down. There's a KFC just right outside where I live. They actually shut down drive-thru. They're only allowing the delivery guys to go in and pick up, and they don't even get to go into the restaurant. They pick up through a little window. So that's I feel that there might be a lot of startup opportunities to copy from China to Brazil or the U.S. But
I think that, like, sorry if I can bother you. In Brazil, the courts didn't close. I mean, they moved online too. So this is something very interesting. You know, you could, you know, set an appointment with a Zoom meeting or a Skype meeting with a judge or this and that, and they can book hearings online. And that's something that's different. Like, for example, this might give a big push in ODR, like the online dispute resolutions, you know, and this. So we might see a change even in the legal market. You know, instead of people going and having the claims, they might pull into that. There was a discussion into push on in Brazil for you to be obliged to go through, you know, an alternative online dispute resolution in several issues and minor issues. And now that's resistant. Any resistance that was about it's gone. So this is something that's gonna push forward very quickly. And like Brazil, like in US, you probably have a lot of consumer issues, and that's a big problem for anyone who sell goods. And if you have an easier, cheaper way to solve it, then it's going to be a boost for that market.
Right. Yeah, actually, we from our firm's practice, I know that New York, I think the courts are taking some cases. I think USCIS, Immigration Bureau, are mostly working, at least from what I'm seeing here in China, is they did start off with virtual hearings and online hearings and stuff like that. But what I've been seeing here a lot is they're trying to push for settlements on most of the cases, right? They're putting a lot of resources into the court staff and communicating with, you know, with all parties, and tell them that, you know, hey, if you really want to go down this road, you know, the normal waiting time is going to be like 3 months, 6 months, a year. Now you're going to have to wait for like 3 years, right? So they're really pushing for people to try to solve issues on their own.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a very new world. But I kind of wanted to go on the last round where we talked about this in private, where Jennifer and Chris mentioned this earlier, on the recovery of a crisis, right? There are all kinds of models, or there are 3 basic models, right? The U, the V, and the L. So hoping that things turn out great, and hoping that there are, you know, different opportunities in different industries coming, you know, rising in this coming future. At least in your field, Jennifer, do you think it's still going to be very unstable for the next year, 2 years, or, you know, is this hit a long-term one, or you think it's going to bounce back?
So Cushman & Wakefield's projection is that it's going to be kind of a U shape, but it's not like a sharp. It's not going to be a sharp V shape. It's going to be kind of slowly a U shape. So in terms of bottom of this U, we feel like the recession start from, you know, March. We feel it will come back slowly around the end of 2022. So we are expecting, from our commercial real estate industry, we are expecting a decline in next 2.5 years. And we anticipate 4 to 5 years, the rent should go back to the original level.
Right. Chris, I'm not sure if, you know, if you can share anything on the economic trend of, or sort of like the recession trends in the U.S. But, you know, for my little understanding of economics is that, you know, these trends tend to last, 7-10 years, or right, at least in a normal cycle, right? In a normal cycle. So where do you think we are at? And, you know, if according to Cushman & Wakefield and what Jennifer just pointed out, you know, this is going to keep going on for a couple of, you know, 4 or 5 years. Is there any possibility that this might go for even longer?
Well, again, I don't think none of us are economists, so we can only go on our experience. I think the trend now will be is sort of what we talked about before, away from the big cities, mostly in the real estate markets and even in the, any sort of retail. Maybe smaller, like ghost kitchens, I think is a big thing that you mentioned. Because if I'm a restaurateur, why do I need 4,000 square feet and 100 seats that I can't use half of them because of distancing? I'll open a little kitchen, people come and pick it up. I cut my overhead. So I think we're going to be smaller, and I think we're going to be more spread out, for several years. I don't know, but I think eventually the big cities will come back. They'll be down, but I think eventually, the big cities are the big cities for a reason. That's where all the, New York is the city that never sleeps. They call it that for a reason because it has the culture, it has the theater, it has the museums, it has the restaurants, and that's not all going to go away. So I think eventually things will, turn again, and the larger cities will come back.
Right. Let me just remind our audience. I'm just going to remind them in Chinese if they have any questions, because we're going to be rounding up soon. 如果各位有问题的话，可以在这个提问区或者是在这个聊天区跟我们提一下，我们应该是在这个10到15分钟内就会结束我们这个论坛了。All right. So so the reason why I mentioned Ghost Kitchen is I actually have a very successful entrepreneur friend. I did talk to him about 3 days ago, and one of the things that he mentioned is, at least in China, is that absolutely restaurants are closing, but it's exactly the same of what Chris pointed out, right? New York is New York. Although I lived there for 3-4 years, I'm still Brazilian at heart, but I understand the whole culture and dynamic of New York. New York is very, very strong. It will always be that way. And I feel the same for São Paulo, right? It's São Paulo in Latin America, it's still the biggest city. It's still going to stand strong there. Faria Lima, our financial district's kind of still going to be there. All the law firms and the investment bankers and the real estate developers, everybody's going to be there. But, I think it's, just to a little closing time for everybody. How can we remind our clients, or how can we remind people we work with, our partners, how can we remind them to keep strong, right? To stay out of potential risks moving from now on, right? Because I don't feel it's really just adding a clause about having a next pandemic. I think it's really the whole mentality of how you conduct business is different. So let me just start off with Chris. Moving forward, what else would you be telling your clients to watch out for?
I think what I would tell people, you have to take the long-term view of things. You can't focus. I mean, this seems like it's gone on for so long, this pandemic. I mean, for you, Sam, it's been 5 months. I mean, for us, it's been 3. For Jennifer and I, it's been 3. For Ronaldo, maybe even a little less. But, it's only 5 months for you, right? It's not a lifetime. And, this will go away. Things will get back to normal. Maybe the normal won't be the same, but there's still opportunity to be successful. There's still opportunity to thrive. You may have to adjust your business in some way, but now's not the time to give up in any way, in my opinion. You have to stay strong. If you can make it, because, things will turn around in the economy and in the markets and everything else. And in our overall health, I think things will turn around.
Absolutely. Jennifer, what would you be telling your clients moving forward?
I think, what Chris said, I couldn't have said better. Chris was, I absolutely, echo his sentiment. So from my industry, I actually tell my clients that, do not make a. So I'll give you an example, right? So last month, when everybody was crying about commercial real estate disaster, you suddenly heard about this, our Chinese firm TikTok sent 80,000 square feet office in 4 Times Square. But for 10 years, by the way. So if TikTok is my clients, I would not suggest them to take a 10-year lease. I would suggest them to take a 2-year lease, the most, because of first of all, it's pandemic, right? Pandemic will affect the rent, right? You don't need to pay that much for 10 years. That's first thing. Second of all, there's such a geopolitical change. It's basically changing every single day. Even Biden become a president. This anti-China thing is gonna carry for a while. Maybe not gonna be a decade, but it's gonna carry a while. So I would tell my clients to be cautious. I don't care. I'm not making that much money. I want my clients to be safe. Including one of the clients, I can tell you a Chinese client signed one of the most expensive building in the city, which is the GM building. They signed 10-year lease with another broker. I'm stunned. And then pandemic happened, they default on the rent, and then the GM building say, there's nothing we're gonna do. You guys just need to leave, and then we keep the 12 months rent. I mean, they signed 10-year lease. I mean, I just feel like Chinese firm, particularly my client, has been taking advantage a lot because, just not familiar with the market or just being too aggressive. Sometimes being smart, being a little bit flexible is actually quite wise, I would say.
Right, absolutely. Ronaldo, probably this might help you the most since you're still sort of at the beginning of everything that's happening. From now on, what learning from China, learning from the US, what are your key issues that you're going to be telling your clients?
Yeah, I think as a general, I mean, not about legal, I'm not talking about all of the force majeure or the material adverse effect clauses. But what we saw in Brazil, and particularly from our clients too, is that those who had invested a lot in governance, corporate governance, has shown a lot of resilience into coming up. And even when the markets goes down, when the market's good, everybody's making money, so you're not focused a lot on how the internal procedures, how the company work. But when the markets get unstable, if you are sure, if you have that image and if you work that properly, the market's more confidence in companies that have a corporate governance in place, and that would also derive into other sectors, into if you have environmental and social, something that we're feeling that the sense of purpose that the millennials were looking for, and then the market, also the market's going to increase. They would increase that amount. So investing like in ESG is something that will be very interesting. Obviously you need to navigate for this time, keeping the cash flow and this and that. We're still working, sit on the cash, work on the cash flow, that kind of advice. But governance is definitely, the way to go. Is a good anchor to keep you safe in hard times.
Right. My key takeaway from this whole pandemic are actually two things. I think it would be wise for us to be advising our clients to it's exactly what Chris said, to get in any kind of field for the long run, right? If you don't have enough ammo to invest or do a business, to be able to sustain yourself until you start making a profit, then you should probably rethink a lot, right? And secondly is it's on the issue that Jennifer said. It's again like I don't think it's our game to talk about politics, but maybe next time we can invite James Berger, our partner of compliance. I think we should be reminding every client in every industry to just be more diligent in compliance with local laws, right? One of the things that I've been speaking to my friends in Brazil is, since the world is shifting to a more polarized sort of like political atmosphere, what we should be doing is letting clients know that, hey, you can play by the rules in China. These rules can also be conformed in the US, and the same can be done in Brazil, right? So if anybody has any kind of investments or businesses or interest in sort of like the global arena, then global compliance with local laws, with local authorities, and making sense of different jurisdictions and making sure that everybody you do business with is comfortable. That's actually already a very good head start, right? So these are my key takeaways. I hope that our attendees were able to learn from our panelists, learn their experiences, their insights, and the little key takeaway that I shared. But I want to thank everyone again. I know it's very, very late wherever you are. We will be doing a lot more of these, and I hope that I can get to host another webinar with you. So I'm gonna leave the floor to Ivy if she's still around.
Yes. 好的，那感谢我们今天几位嘉宾的分享。我刚刚的话也把这个最新的这个调查发布出来了，所以请大家在退出今天我们的会议之前帮忙我来填写一下这个调查问卷。再一次，我们这个是只做纯粹的这个活动信息收集用，并不做任何商业用途，所以的话您可以放心来填写。刚刚我也有看到这个我们参与者有在这个聊天功能当中提到说这个中文翻译的问题。其实我们今天这几位嘉宾里面的话其实都是多语种可以为大家服务的，所以如果其实您刚才过程当中有一些个没有听明白的这个问题，可以在我们的这个调查的最后有一项说您希望我们帮您与哪一位嘉宾取得联络，选择这一项那我们可以帮您做这样的一个对接联络。所以其实整场我刚刚听下来的话，我其实也在一边是在怀旧过去，一边也是在思考这个新的这个生活。所谓这个怀旧的话，其实是在想我们当年还有这个所谓 work from work 这样一个经历，能够每天去办公室跟同事们一起去共同工作这样一个环境。当然也在思考说这个其实新的这个所谓正常的生活状态下，人们的社交社会的运作究竟会是怎么样的。其实最后给大家分享一个前两天在这个 social media 上，在 Facebook 上看到一个非常有趣的一个活动，是有一个人发起了一个，应该是在2022年或者2025年，差不多同一个时期的一个，也是好像线下的一个聚会活动。他说那个时候我们会非常怀念2年前或者是5年之前，我们有这样一个机会，能够跟自己独处，能够跟家人独处，能够体会一次就是这种非常不一样的一种生活方式。我知道这现在对咱们来讲是一种非常难以忍受的一个阶段，但是几年之后再回来看的时候，会是一段我想回忆起来非常有趣、非常不一样的这个经历。当然，我们下一次再在线上论坛再见的话呢，不需要等到2年或者5年之后，下个星期四晚上美东时间晚上的10点钟，北京时间早上10点，我们还会有同样类型的这个线上的论坛分享。那下一次我们会去主要讨论关于知识产权这个部分。下次的话呢，我们会提前把这个活动信息也发布给大家，所以大家如果有任何的提前想好的问题，或者是有一些个关于这个领域里面的一些想要了解的东西，可以准时来参加我们的这个线上活动。那就今天我们再次感谢所有的嘉宾和所有在线上跟我们一起听今天这个线上论坛讨论的所有的参与者们，感谢大家。So yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Have a good day or night, depending on where you are.
Good night. Thank you.
Okay.
Good night. Good night.
Take care, everyone.
Good
All right,
night,
guys.
Chris.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye.